Hello, BookTube. So I'm here today to try to review Point Omega, which is a book by DeLillo. I'm going to start by saying I don't know if I'm entirely qualified to review this, but I'm going to try because I did have a lot of thoughts on the subject, and because based on what I've kind of scoured off of the internet, people have very different opinions and impressions of this book, and the author hasn't really come out to say anything about his intentions with writing it or like and so I don't really know what we're like supposed to be getting out of it, but this is what I did. So and I mean, it is going to talk about the entire duration of the book, which is 119 pages. So if you're like not into spoilers, like I wouldn't watch this video, but I will say that this book isn't really one that can be spoiled, just because so much of it is about the writing and than about like necessarily the plot or the events that happen. Like, even if you just read the synopsis, you've basically already covered all of the events that happen in the book. Like, I normally don't care about spoilers, but this one I wouldn't. My advice would be not to care very much. Anyways, so I found this book when when my local library did the whole blind date with a book thing, and and I picked it up because it said it was a piece of literary fiction, and I opened it on camera and stuff, so I'll put a link to that video down in the description box. But I never heard of DeLillo, but his style is completely unique to any other style that I've ever discovered, and I can't decide if he's either an absolute genius or if he's like completely bullshitting everyone on the entire planet. And I hope I'm smart enough to be able to figure out which one it is. It might be a bit of both, honestly. So we'll see how this goes. But basically, this book is all about a professor whose intellect was instrumental in developments for the Iraq War during the Bush administration. And it's sort of his recollections years after the fact, and about what he thinks will end humanity. And it takes place in his home in the desert, and and a former student of his comes to visit him because he wants to interview him for a sort of documentary. All he wants is for the professor to just sit and talk on camera for as long as he wants to talk, with no interruptions, no editing, no nothing. And so basically this entire book is just the professor like waxing poetic about his thoughts. The characters, we don't know that much about their history. We don't know, not a lot happens aside from them drinking a lot of whiskey. It feels very much, it feels very pretentious, and like, for example, the professor, whose name is Elster, he says things like how he wanted his war to be like a haiku, things that you can, sound impressive and, like, kind of makes brilliant sense, but also are just stupid. So this is a book that you basically have to sit down and read in one sitting, because otherwise you'll be completely lost and have no idea what's going on. The way that DeLillo uses words completely took me by surprise. He would use them in such a way that I would be looking up words in the dictionary that I learned when I was 9. Things like transitory or something. It completely took me by surprise, and I would call his use of diction almost supernatural. And he says lots of things like that. He just kind of like casts off these sentences that aren't necessarily relevant to the overarching theme of the novel, but like, is literature meant to capture our fear of losing time? That's one quote. Things that I would write down when I was, reading the book, because I thought, maybe this will fit into the larger theme, and ultimately meant nothing. And again, maybe it did, but I wasn't smart enough to pick it up. Basically, Elster's predicting the end of humanity, or as he calls it, consciousness has exceeded its capacity. He says that again, life has come from matter, and at some point, during the process of evolution, there was the invention of the cell, and there was the procreation of species, and we just proliferated and blossomed and took over the earth. And now the reverse of that is going to happen, and that's what he calls the omega point. Again, referencing the title, obviously, point omega, the point where we are going to reach the end of the line and basically reach the end of the line of progression and start regressing back into just being matter. He says, or as he says, quote, "We want to be stones in a field." But so basically, Elster's daughter shows up at his house while his student is there, and her name is Jessie, and she has a tumultuous relationship with her father, but her father adores her. And so there's one point too where his student wants to sleep with Jessie, and she doesn't want to, and so they don't have sex. And I interpreted that as a little bit of symbolism for the fact that there's a lack of procreation. So they have personally reached the point omega where there is no longer reproduction. There is only not necessarily destruction, but there is no longer reproduction, but only sterilization, and again the end of the species and the continuation of matter. And so, though later when Jessie goes missing, her father's incredibly devastated, and that's when his consciousness slips away. His own, he becomes completely incapacitated. He loses control of himself. He no longer articulates. He no longer thinks. He is completely unable to take care of himself. And again, it's kind of like his individual omega point, and which is kind of on the nose, but where he has regressed from being a fully articulated person with complete consciousness and to wanting to be that stone in the field, wanting to cease from existence. A lot of people have had significant problems with this novel. They think it's kind of again, the most common word used is pretentious or rambling, stuff like that. But I really enjoyed it. It was 119 pages, and it took me 4 hours to read, which is just ridiculous. But it really made me think a lot. And I wouldn't say it's perfect by any means, but I did give it 5 stars just because it was so engaging to read, and it made me think about so many different things, and it really is something that you have to actively be reading. You can't just flip through the pages. You have to, at every single sentence, just stop and reconsider what everything possibly means. It's kind of about no matter how much human arrogance you have, whether as a species or as an individual, which is kind of there is eventually a point where the consciousness stops and it has reached its carrying capacity, or as the professor has called it, he's coined his own term, the omega point. And there's this cessation, you cease to exist. I don't know, I thought it was a really unique way of expressing that. So that's what I liked about it. And it's possible that I will come back to this in a month and decide that it was absolutely terrible and that the author was just and that the author was basically, had no idea what he was talking about. And, but for the moment, I really did enjoy it. So I've heard it's quite different from his other works, though, but I'm definitely planning to read more DeLillo, and yeah, so let me know if you've read this book in the comments or not. Oh, by the way, it like takes place in the desert, which is like so like such an obvious metaphor. You know how like sometimes when authors do something and it's like like and it's and the metaphor is so obvious it's just like hitting you over the head. My sister and I do this thing where we're like metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. Just to, and I think it's kind of funny. Just about like, yeah, okay, slow down. We get it. You know, we get what we're supposed to infer from this. We're not, you know, 6th grade English students. So it takes place in the desert. Obviously, you know, end of species, end of time. We get it, DeLillo. But yeah, so I enjoyed it. I will see you all next time. Bye. Oh my gosh, I figured it out. So while I was like watching this video over and preparing to upload it and everything like that, I kept feeling like I was missing something, and I think I finally realized what it is. So the professor says that he wants a haiku war, and the exact passage, which again, it sounds really weird, the exact passage is, haiku means nothing beyond what it is, a pond in summer, a leaf in the wind. It's human consciousness located in nature. It's the answer to everything in a set number of lines, a prescribed syllable count. I wanted a haiku war. I wanted a war in 3 lines. This was not a matter of force levels or logistics. What I wanted was a set of ideas linked to transient things. This is the soul of haiku. Bear everything to plain sight. See what's there. Things in war are transient. See what's there and be prepared to watch it disappear. So, the thing is, if you read that at first, which you do because it's on page 29, you think, okay, that's kind of weird. But if you come back to it later, you realize what he means is he wants what he was expecting from his intelligence and what he gave during the Iraq War was he wanted to kind of do it as like an experiment in which he showed his as a kind of experiment to expose his academic ideas to their own point omega and to watch them disappear at the end. So he wasn't expecting. That's what he was expecting from the war. He didn't want something that would last. He wasn't content with the destruction that had occurred because of the intellectual gift that he had supplied to the Pentagon. What he wanted was just to expose his ideas to light and see how they worked, and then just allow them to float away and no longer be active and destructive. So, or at least that's what I think it's supposed to mean. He was expecting that from his activity during the Bush administration, and that was like a micro example of what he thought would eventually happen to the world. So for him, it was almost like a mini experiment. But then what happens is in sort of like a weird twist of karma or something like that. I hate that word, but I'm going to use it here. What happens is the devastation happens to him, and his point omega is the loss of his daughter, where he loses his own consciousness, and he is, because he has exceeded its carrying capacity, and he slowly returns back to inorganic matter. I think that's what it was. So read Point Omega. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars.